week on Roast in Peace, we're honoring Ric Ocasek, the lead vocalist, rhythm guitarist, and songwriter for the great rock and roll band The Cars.
Poor Rick passed away from heart failure, so his last words were, "You gave me just what I needed, except a defibrillator." Oh, we go deep, Joe. We go deep.
Like
this is therapy for me.
I feel better.
You feel better,
I
right?
wished it was about Eddie Money, but yes, I feel better.
Welcome to the show, my emotional support humans. This is Thick Skin with Jeff Ross. I always say life is hard, but don't worry, because we're getting through it together. I was up all night thumbing through a new book. I didn't thumb through it. I read it. I fucking read it. I wanted to thumb through it, and I wound up just reading it till 3 o'clock in the morning. It comes out soon. You can pre-order it. It's Garry Shandling's book, edited with an introduction by Judd Apatow. My guest happens to be Judd Apatow, who I saw the other night at my birthday dinner. He's a nice guy, a movie producer, a director, like the biggest, like Knocked Up and This Is 40 and Trainwreck, and then he produces stuff like the biggest movies ever. So everything from Bridesmaids to Love and Crashing, and I'm forgetting half of it. I mean, this is the most Googleable thing ever. But the point is, out of nowhere, Judd says, "Hey, I heard you talked to Robert Smigel on your podcast. Why don't I come on your podcast?" I'm like, "I don't have a podcast." What do you? Oh yeah, I have a podcast. No one's ever asked to be on it before. I mean, this is a true friend right here. So usually I have friends and family on. Judd is a friend. I mostly know him not as this big fancy movie producer director. I mostly know Judd as a comedian, a guy who goes on late at night and talks to strangers like I do. And Judd usually has a notebook with him, and I feel like this is his mental cardio going up on stage. Judd, you're directing and producing all day. I see you here. You're editing your new movie, Staten Island movie. But in the back of your head, are you like, I can't wait to go on tonight? I need to get on stage. I want the laughs. Like, is it just an excuse not to go home to your family? Like,
That's what they think.
like what's going on in your head? How do you?
Well, my wife, had never seen me do stand-up because I started doing it again 17 years into our relationship. So she had never seen me on stage doing stand-up.
I would never have women if they didn't see me do stand-up. Like, how did you even get?
My wife had the opposite reaction. She was just so surprised. Like, wait a second. Now you want to start going to clubs in the middle of the night?
Right.
How many times a week? How does this work?
She thought she was marrying a big-time movie director,
Yeah.
and now she's got the guy with the 11:15 at the Comedy Store.
Exactly. But it's like today, I did a show last night at Largo. We did a benefit for the National Compassion Fund, which raises money to go to victims of mass shootings. So we did an event with Bill Burr and Rami and Vanessa Bayer and Ricky Velez, and I had no new jokes. I was so bummed. Yeah. And so I just said, well, I'll just co-host it with Vanessa, and Vanessa's so funny. Yeah. So we just chatted between acts, and it was great. But the next day you're like, damn, you didn't sit your ass in the chair and write some new jokes to get up there. So yeah, it is always in my head, even when I'm editing.
Right.
Because I don't think it's that fun to do if you're not trying a few things every set.
I went up last night at the Comedy Store, and I've been working on the Alec Baldwin roast for a month, so I don't have any new stand-up. Yeah. So part of myself is just dropping myself into the blender of a random audience and going, let me just talk until I get a laugh, and maybe I'll get a new joke out of it. But you're right. The discipline is to go home and fire up a notebook or a computer and write.
Do you do that? Will you hit a computer to write stand-up jokes?
I think after last night, I'm going to have to. Like, I do feel so much. I have such a better swagger in my step when I have a few new ideas that are coming, even if they're not fully baked yet. And you never know. I've been doing it long enough, and I'm sure you can relate. there's no such thing as wasted writing, in my opinion. Even if I try something out, I'll either make it work or I'll drop it, but it'll take me to another thing. So to me, it's never a waste of time to write.
Well, there are some people that are like, I never sit with a piece of paper or a computer. It all happens up there. I can't remember anything if I didn't type it out or write it out. My brain is just mush. Maybe because I'm doing other things, but I need some paperwork.
You go up there with like a Unabomber manifesto. I mean,
I never look at it ever. I don't think I've ever looked at it.
Judd walks into the comedy clubs like yeah. It looks like you got a marked up Torah under your arm sometimes. I'm like, why is he bringing his shot list on stage? But you're organized, and we do have to sort of find the balance between how to make our jokes. Do we write them ahead of time? Do we do them on stage? I remember going to the recording studio with John Mayer a bunch of times, and it blows my mind, and it makes me kind of mad sometimes. He writes his songs in the studio with the musicians, and I can't think of a bigger waste of money. But when you're selling billions of albums, it's okay.
I would think it would be hard to talk about your feelings in front of the other musicians. So the music you could write with other people, but then to suddenly switch gears and go, all right, guys, I'd like to talk about my broken heart with you for a little while, and let's write some lyrics about my broken heart. Like,
bring the trumpet player in. The creative process, and there's a lot to talk about with you because you're just multifaceted, very accomplished guy, and I want to talk to you a little bit later about time management because it does blow my mind how you manage to produce these documentaries, edit this new book, and direct these movies, write these movies, and develop these movies, all while you're having a family and a life, and you still go out at night and do your stand-up. So I think that's going to be something our listeners are going to be curious about because people get so stressed out, and a lot of real comedy fans and comics listen to this podcast. But there is something that's like blowing my mind, and it's this book that I really wanted to ask you about because I did read it last night. And, we all have our mentors and our friends, and we try to pay tribute to them. We try to keep their memory alive. We try to take them with us in all the things we do. And this book comes out. You were nice enough to give me an advance copy. It's Garry Shandling's book with an introduction by Judd Apatow. It's full of pictures and quotes and jokes and interviews, and everybody who was anybody in big-time comedy during the reign of Garry Shandling is in this book. A lot of our friends, other directors, great comics weigh in. It's not just a love letter to a comedy legend. It's something deeper. It's a tribute to a friend and a mentor, but it's full of philosophies and spirituality. It's truly a comedy Bible of sorts if you want to buy into the religion of the stand-up. And a Tumblr's Torah.
Yes.
Is what I thought last night.
Like Jesus wandering the desert looking for, what his journey should be.
It's a deep dive into how this one very special person, this very rare comedic mind thinks. And as I read it, and it was late, I heard a lot of you. I know you better than I knew Garry, and I heard a lot of you in this. Even though it's his writings, I feel like you have done that, Judd. You have taken some of the spirituality and maybe some of his even religious beliefs. He was a Buddhist.
Interested in Eastern thought. Right. I don't know if he called himself a Buddhist, but he seemed to be focused in that direction.
I see. So he would sort of he would be influenced by that, by Eastern thoughts, and he jots them down all through his life. And he's a hoarder, which you didn't know until he passed away and you went into his house, which really shows love. When you walk into someone's past and you uncover them and you you look at their journals, and by the way, the movie, this, if you haven't seen the Zen Diaries of Garry Shandling, is that the right title?
That is.
You have to see this documentary. This is a beautiful piece of art that Judd made about 2 years ago now, and now this book is sort of a continuation of that. And I think if you're into comedy and spirituality, you'll get a lot out of it. This podcast is mostly about getting through life when times are tough, you know. And I know you're producing Gary Goldman's documentary about stand-up documentary about depression, and then this book is also coming out, which I think in a lot of ways would help me and other people get through tough times.
Yes.
You know, what would Gary tell somebody if somebody said, Gary, I'm really depressed. My career's not working. I can't really see the light at the end of the tunnel. Would Gary have a sort of pep talk that he might give a performer?
I think he would. I don't know if I'm the best person to try to recreate what it might be, but a lot of what he writes about in the book is letting go of your ego, and so much of our pain is about tracking how well we're doing in comparison to other people, where we feel like we've succeeded or failed or let people down. And a lot of Buddhism is letting go of all of that. I mean, there's an expression that you hear Gary talk about, which is drop the story. Just drop the story of your success, of your failure. Just get in the moment, because right now, in this very moment, everything is fine. And he was always about that. Just drop all of that.
Live in the moment.
Live in the moment, do your work.
Which is also, I mean, just to stumble into something, how he would interview people. When Gary was doing those classic Tonight Show appearances as a guest host for Johnny Carson, or even in the fake ones in the Larry Sanders Show, which seemed improvised to me when I was watching them, he wasn't trying to think of a funny joke. He was listening in the moment.
Yes, that was his whole thing, is being present. And so, you know, the book, it has sections of interviews I did for the documentary, other interviews, but I'm also tracking his journals through 30 years. And when I made the documentary, a lot of people would take pictures of moments in the documentary that had something inspirational.
They take screenshots of his words.
Yes, and I thought, oh, people really want that. And so I went through all the journals again, because when you make a documentary, you can only show a little quote for like 3 seconds.
Right.
And you also can't show 25 sentences. So I thought, what would people like to read that I got to read that would change their lives? And some of it is about that, you know, how he looks at life, how he learned to be present, because he realized at some point that like there's a section where he says you shouldn't have stage fright, because when you have stage fright, you're worried about how you come across. But if I'm on stage, I'm always Gary. No matter how scared I am, I'm still Gary. So there's no reason to have stage fright, because I'm always me either way. And that's, you know, weird Buddhist, you know, what is the sound of one hand clapping type of way to think about it. But it's very effective. Like, yeah, I'm Judd on stage, whether I like it or not, whether I think I'm being cool or doing it right or wrong. I'm just me. I can't trick anybody, so I might as well just relax and be as pure a version of myself as I can be. And the journals just had hundreds of pages.
It's wonderful to be able to just stare. If you open the book, it's beautiful. It's well done. But you can stare at things that were only flashed on screen in the documentary. Yes. If you want to read, you know, the extended versions of his journals, it's pretty amazing. And
this is one that you just turned to that I think is so interesting. He's talking about why at the Larry Sanders Show he was hard on people, and that he felt like it was a war sometimes with the staff to make it work. And you know what that's like when you're trying to make something great, and some people are around you are good and some don't get it, and you feel like you're being a ball buster because
you're actually being a perfectionist, or you're just being great.
We're going for greatness, and so every once in a while someone around you doesn't get the drill.
Well, I'm sure you can relate to that as a director.
Sure, because you have, you know, hundreds of people working for you, and some are just the best ever, and some people are not nailing it.
Right.
And so Gary, I found this in his journal. He says, I can be hard to work with because I demand truth in the writing and acting. I can't commit to falseness or there's no passion for me. So if you're not interested in digging into the core of what makes it funny, then you're going to think I'm a pain in the ass. It's like a basketball coach who demands the best for his team, or a player who demands the best from himself or his teammates. And that's, I'm sure when you're doing a roast and you've got a writing staff,
Right.
and you know how many jokes you need, and you know that
Right.
each person needs to be special, there's that moment where you're like, this is, it pushes you to figure out how to be a leader, how to be a manager, but you're also trying to be funny.
You also got to develop the talent. You can't do it all yourself. Do you think perfectionism, whether it's Gary's perfectionism, maybe it's your own, maybe it's the people you work with, do you think that holds you back? Or do you think that emotionally, like,
Yeah. Well, it's like being in flow. They talk about athletes being in flow. I'm always interested in books about flow. So if Michael Jordan is having the best game of his life, he's probably doing it because as he's driving to the basket, he's not thinking, "Oh man, I hope I make it." People are gonna be mad if I don't make it, and that's as a comedian, you notice that if you're on stage and you're like, there's a lot of people here. It would be really bad if I started bombing for the next 20 minutes. That ruins it. You're trying to get to your pure creative self that isn't interfered with by the critic. The critic is interfering with your flow of creativity.
And I've had this argument, not this argument, but this sort of debate with Jimmy Kimmel one time. He would say, Jeff, you're obsessing, you're being a perfectionist. Your 80% is better than almost anyone else's 100%. Just get through it and go on to the next thing and produce more and do more.
Yeah.
But I can't. I want to do it hands-on. I want to make it great. I struggle with that myself, and I think probably a lot of entertainers do.
Well, there are people like Larry David. They make one show. They don't have 7 shows on the air, and they make the best show of all time. And
that's like Gary's thing. When people would come up, Garry Shandling says this. This is a great quote in the book that's coming out. Is fans would come up to him and say, love the Larry Sanders Show. What are you working on next or whatever? And which everyone hates that question.
Yes. It's already over.
So he would say, "What? That wasn't good enough." Yeah. So
I mean, I always looked up to people like James Brooks, who they made a movie every bunch of years, and you knew he was just obsessing on this one thing. And I've tried to figure out how to do more. And I am impressed with people who do a lot of things at a high level. You can do that. I think every person figures out what they're capable of. Someone said to me, they were talking to Aaron Sorkin, and they said, how do you do it? And he says, I do one thing at a time.
Right.
But yet there are people that do 7 things at a time at a high level. Well, I haven't directed a movie since Trainwreck, so even though I'm doing documentary projects and working on
you did
TV
Abnett Brothers
shows,
documentary, you produce Love, you produce Crashing, and probably 10 other things that no one knows about yet because you haven't announced them, and you have this beautiful big building here. So to be able to go, I'm just going to write this screenplay for a few months, that's a real discipline.
Yeah, it's hard. You have to say, all right, I have this much to do. I guess I'm going to sit in this room with Pete Davidson and Dave Cyrus and write all morning till 2 o'clock, and then I'm going to send them on their way. And from 2 to 6, I'm going to go over the Gary book and read a couple of scripts. And you just figure out your day. Like, I'm most focused in the morning. That'll be the writing time. In the afternoon, it'll be more kind of giving notes and management.
When do you fit in time to smoke pot and masturbate?
I had to give that up. That is the nightmare of this
then I don't
life.
understand what's going on. Now I'm having a hard time understanding how this. This is really tricky for me now. So.
I mean, there's a thing in the Gary book that I always quote. I kind of know it by heart, but let's see if I can find it. But there was 1 or 2 things that really like hit me that I go back to. Like this one I found, he says, this is in 2001, he says, you realize now that comedy is your soul. You are fully being when you're creative and funny. Be all that. Now you remember it isn't just work.
Right.
which you could tell was a profound thought for him.
I did. If you'll notice, flag that in my book here. Comedy is your soul is what he basically says.
And that's because it is so painful to do it that you forget how much fun it is, because you so want it to be great that it's causing you so much pain. So even Garry had to go like, wait, no, this is you. It's fun. This is your contribution
Don't you
to
think
people.
of it, especially you, because you do it in addition to the other things you do. And me, I do it almost every night. I still think of stand-up as a hobby. If I can keep the mindset of I'm doing this by choice for fun,
Yes.
even though the money comes along and it's a gig and you make commitments, like ultimately this is a choice, like a hobby.
Absolutely. For me,
And that takes a lot of the heat off it, the pressure.
and at least for me, I'm like you that way. Having no pressure to be successful as a stand-up comedian makes me able to do it much
To be a mediocre
better.
comedian.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, I know where I stand, Jeff, believe me. But this is the other one I found where he says, maybe your comedy is a natural gift to be given to others with joy to help them through this impossible life, and you sharing it with no desire of getting anything. And, that's the quote above all of them that lands for me. Just when we're doing it at our best, it's a pure giving expression and communal experience with the crowd, which sounds kind of corny, but really when it's going amazing, that's what's happening.
And do you think that's why maybe in your own life too you consider stand-up a gift? You said you did a benefit last night. I know you do these regular benefits at Largo. When it's all about me, I had that transformation too, where you're young and you're eager and you're competitive with your friends and how big is my name on the marquee and what's going to be in my green room and then you develop a little bit more, and maybe it was Garry's influence on you or whatever, but with me it was just sort of the death of my mentor. When Buddy Hackett passed away, I was like, what am I doing with my life? I was a little lost, and that's when the war in Iraq started in 2003, shortly after that, and that's when I saw Bob Hope die on the cover of the New York Times, and I was like, wow, I guess a comedian can be more than just what I'm doing, making fun of the drunk in the front and doing it for the free chicken wings and hitting on the waitresses, and there's more to it. It can actually be a gift. Mm-hmm. I went to Iraq and sort of doing shows for the troops and sort of doing more stuff for other people, and it made me it was the loss of my mentor that opened my eyes in a way. And
because you have to become the person that mentors people at a certain point, the whole thing reverses,
and you don't even realize it's happening. Sometimes they happen in such little tiny baby steps.
We did that USO show together,
the 75th anniversary of the USO,
and that was remarkable. I hadn't done one of those shows before, and the president is there, and Joe Biden, and
it was organized by Dr. Jill Biden and Michelle Obama, who were on the USO board. I don't know if they still are. And it was at Andrews Air Force Base. This is 6-7 years ago, probably, right? Maybe 5-6 years ago, and what was remarkable about it wasn't just that we were there honoring our country and paying tribute to the USO, but because it was on an Air Force base, we had the vice president and the president in the same room at the same time.
It was very rare.
Is very rare. And
made for a good photo.
And but you stupidly brought your daughter. I was able to be in the middle with the Bidens on one side and the Obamas, and I'm right in the middle. Like, your picture was shot. Like, I have the ultimate picture. And everybody was a little nervous. Like, I remember Jon Stewart was there and David Letterman was there, and it was like, okay, we're all Mulaney and Biggs and it really made us all giddy.
Yes.
When do you see David Letterman giddy?
And he's stuck with us, which is the funny part, because we're all waiting in line to take our picture with the president.
Right.
But the president is delayed, and so there's this long line of people like through this office structure, and Letterman's on the line.
Right.
And so it's it's over an hour. It could have been an hour and a half. of him just stuck talking to us, which is our dream. It's not his dream, but we're like, oh my God, he's right there. Should I go try to say something to him? And he's so nice, and he's thrilled to be there. But
he was super polite on the line, but if you recall, you and I had a little powwow outside by the trailers. I don't know if it was you or me who said, let's go knock on Letterman's door and see if he wants to come hang out with us. Because there was a little craft services area. We had an hour to kill. We were in suits. It was hot. And
we had to see what was possible with Dave. We're the two perfect guys that have the balls to do that.
I don't think I would have thought to do that. It had to have been you saying, Jeff, what you needed my help for in that moment for, I don't know. But we basically went over and, looked at us like we locked eyes and simultaneously knocked on Letterman's trailer door. And terrified, and hey, Dave, it's Jeff and Judd. We want to know if you want to go grab a bite with us over by the craft store. He's like, no,
I'm good here.
No, there's plenty of pineapple up here. Yeah. He loves some pineapple before he goes on. We've all read that.
He was preparing.
But I love doing shows that aren't just about. Even this book you wrote, I feel like there's so much comedy that's like a one-person show, or it's like, and I enjoyed Nanette. I'm not saying anything bad about it, but it's about Hannah's experiences. I love that when you didn't write the Judd Apatow book, you wrote a tribute to somebody else, and then you come through that. I love that kind of stuff where there's. You get to write about somebody, and then we get to see the writer through that.
Well, that's why I have another book called Sick in the Head, which is just these interviews I did with comedians when I was 15.
Yeah.
And then I did some new ones for it. And, I always thought, well, based on the questions I ask, you learn enough about me through just normal conversations.
Right.
But, that's my favorite thing. I always think, what do I wish existed? So like, when I saw Garry stuff, I thought, God, that'd be great if there was a book of all this stuff really laid out well. Like when I was a kid, there was the Marx Brothers scrapbook, and I loved it. And then sometimes you realize, oh, this won't happen unless I do it.
Right.
When I was a kid, you remember there were no books about comedy.
Right.
There weren't books, interviews with comedians because there was no podcast.
Well, you had to read Playboy.
You had to read Playboy. That's the only place there was a
long
long-form interview. You had to just walk into your dad's bathroom. That's why it was hard to get.
Did you have to be like, Grandma Molly, will you please go buy me this Playboy?
I don't even think I knew they were in there as a kid. There was one book was called like Comic Lives or something. And so with that book, I thought, I'm sure if I was a young comic, I wish there was one book that chatted with all the people that I would want to ask, how do you do it?
But no one, here's the other thing. Almost no one in high school knows they want to be a comedian. Mm-hmm. No one who actually could become one.
Yeah.
You will hear about that with singers, Justin Timberlake, Britney Spears. They're 3 years old. They're on the Mickey Mouse Club. They know they're going to be in show business. Miley Cyrus, Christina Aguilera, Jim Carrey, you, Eddie Murphy, Dave Chappelle.
Goldthwait.
Bobcat, I did not know that. So there's 5 out of all the comedians that I know, great comedians that knew before college, knew early. And that is such an amazing advantage. When you can recognize what you want to be that young, that's $1 billion in your pocket.
Thank God. And when I was a kid, I knew it was a big deal that I had a goal. So I felt weird in high school. Like I didn't, connect with everybody. I wasn't a jock. I wasn't really a pothead. I was just in the middle. And, I had some good friends, but I loved comedy and no one else did. I mean, now I think in high school, there's a whole groups of kids who love it. Back then, no one liked it.
Right.
So if someone was funny on Letterman and I came to school the next day, there was not one person to go, did you see it?
Right.
But I also thought as a result of that, I think I'll be able to get a job. I had a lot of confidence as a 16-year-old that comedy was not inundated with people who wanted to do it.
Was this in Syosset?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That if I worked my ass off, I think there'll be a job in this business.
Who was advising you? Did you have good parental backup?
I just had, I had a grandfather who produced Dizzy Gillespie and Janis Joplin records. He had his own labels, and he was just a hustler.
So you knew dreams came true.
That's it.
See, in my family, it was my great-grandmother started a catering hall. Then her sons took it over. Then their sons took it over. Then the next one, I was next in line. So I needed an escape route.
Yes.
This was not...
But you knew you needed an escape route.
Yeah, well, luckily my dad died from a coke overdose, and I got out of the business. He died to save my life from being in the catering business.
Would you still have been in it, do you think?
I think I would have been 1 foot in, 1 foot out, because when he passed away, I was actually already a sophomore in film school.
Oh, yeah.
So
you were already.
He knew that I did not want to do that.
Yeah.
And
he was okay with that.
He was.
He wasn't saying you must take over this business.
He was okay with it, which was the greatest gift he could have given me. It was not the guilt trip of, because even he was like, I don't know. I'm sure he was not sure.
Yeah. Well, it's scary. I mean, as a parent now of kids entering the business, you just go, hope you get a job. I mean, as much as you love them and believe in them and know they're talented, ultimately you're entering something that almost no one succeeds in.
And even with help, even having a parent and both parents in the business for any kid, it's like that might help you a little bit, but unless you're really good, this is a really tough business.
Or it just speeds up the rejection. Believe me, people are more excited to reject someone's child than to accept them.
I mentioned there's so much I want to say, but to get back to the book for a second.
Which you can pre-order on Amazon.
I was going to mention that. Not just Amazon. There's a few places.
Barnes & Noble, Penguin Random House. You can go get them there.
It comes out, I think, in November.
Your independent bookstores.
That's right.
Nobody's going to that. Come on.
Diesel. I like Diesel.
Book Soup. Come on.
Book Soup. Yeah, you get it at Book Soup. Go sign up for it at Book Soup right now.
That place should come with Purell when you walk in the place. I went to a Book Soup event the other night for Ben Folds, and it was awesome.
Yeah.
He's got a cool new book out, too. But I love hearing show business stories, and there's a lot in the book that come out through some of the photos and the memories, and one of my favorite things is Rip Torn, who I loved. Yes. He played Hank.
Artie.
Artie, Larry Sanders' producer. And when the show was all over and you were making the rounds as the young EP on the show, you asked everyone to sign your script, your final script, and Rip Torn wrote, "Judd, you're a good soldier." Now, I've been around long enough to know that when someone as experienced as Rip Torn writes that, it's because you're not just a talented good guy and a friend. You're the keeper of the secrets. There's no way he randomly writes, "You're a good soldier." It means you know things that you're never going to tell. And then the book comes out, and you're probably holding back some stuff, and it makes you a good soldier. You're showing your friends in the best possible light, and you're keeping their memory not just alive, but thriving and moving into another generation. And I think that's the greatest mitzvah. That's the greatest gift. I really do admire that, Judd.
Well, every moment with Rip was exciting and electric and terrifying, and he was so funny. But there's a generation of guys, from the 50s and 60s that did not want to be directed. Right. There's this Duval school.
Is that method acting, or is that
I don't know what it is. It's just like, I know what I'm doing. Let's put the camera where you need it. And, like Gene Hackman, guys like that. Like, I got it figured out. Sit over there. Sit down. And Rip, the first time I ever directed, Garry just one day said, "You want to direct the next episode?"
Wow.
I never asked him to direct. I never even considered what would happen directing.
What?
And suddenly I got to walk up to Rip and give him notes. And I found this book about directing that David Mamet wrote. And he said, if you give one tiny note to an actor or an actress, it will change the entire performance. So you don't have to go, say this like that, hit that note, do that, say that louder. He goes, if you just said to someone, I just think you'd be like just a little bit sadder Every single choice they make will be different.
Wow.
And that helped me because I knew not to say
a line
too much
reading,
to
right.
Rip. And even what I did say, like, Rip, I think he'd probably be a little more irritated at this point. He'd be like, no, I wouldn't be. I'm in charge. I don't get irritated. And then what he would do is 3 takes later, he would take your note. So he would say no. And then on take 3, you'd realize, oh, he's doing the note.
Wow. That's cool. I mean, I mean, I'm a student of Mamet also, and one of my favorite. I love that you immediately went to get a book when you got the directing job.
Oh, sure. I remember I
So you're going to need to write a directing book, Judd.
First screenplay I ever wrote, I sold it, and then I'm down in Century City. There used to be this bookstore there, and I'm literally buying the book, How to Write a Screenplay, when the executive I sold the script to walked in the bookstore. It's in my bag. Oh, no, I got it like a bag. I was like, oh, hey. But I'm literally holding How to Write a Screenplay.
It's like getting caught with condoms in front of your nana.
But no, I'm very book driven, if there's something to figure out.
You're going to have to write a directing memoir or a how-to of some kind. It's just inevitable, Judd.
I did one of those master classes.
Right.
Yeah. So
And I didn't see it, but I saw it. I was confused because I feel like it was a master class about what?
I don't know. I mean, I covered a lot of it was comedy and comedy directing. It wasn't heavily on stand-up, although it is about comedy in general.
I remember the ad fooling me a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was debating this with some comics at the Cellar. So it looked like they made it look like it was about directing, but you were actually talking about stand-up.
Well, I don't talk about stand-up much in it. It's mainly about writing and directing comedy. And I have to say, oddly, I think it came out really well. Jay Roach, who directed, Meet the Parents and a lot of great movies, he's part of that organization. So when you do the master class, he's the one talking to me. So like this genius of comedy directing is asking me the question. So although they cut him out, it's good because we're having a great conversation about how we do it. And I have had people walk up to me. I was just at the Improv the other day, and a comedian walked up to me and said, I watched your master class, and I sat my ass in a chair and wrote a pilot, and I just sold it this week.
Really?
And it's so weird to bump into you.
Wow.
So I feel like there's a lot of encouragement in the master class, too.
That's great.
I don't know if it
You're
explains.
creating your own competition.
I am creating the people who will destroy me.
Is that still online, the master class?
It is. I think it's definitely worth it. The whole idea of the master class is a little better than you would think, because I'm the kind of person, if I want to direct, I'll just go home and listen to Scorsese's commentary on Goodfellas. I just think that's very helpful to have someone walk you through how they did it. It programs your brain of how you should look at things.
The first time I ever really understood what a director was, I was in film school at Boston University, and my stoner roommate, Denver Dave Kayam, came home with a DVD, I guess.
Laser disc, Jeff?
Might have been a VHS of Spinal Tap, and it had director commentary from Rob Reiner. Yeah. And I learned so much. I mean, I was always like, how did he know these guys could do these accents and play these instruments? And of course, I'm 19, whatever. I grew up and I realized, oh, well, they were all friends and they jammed and he got it all and then made it into something. A big part of it is recognizing talent and then corralling that into something that makes sense to a general audience.
I remember the Tootsie commentary was Sidney Pollack talking through Tootsie, and it was all about writing, like how they conceived of it and scene for scene, what the point of the scene was,
really,
and how it worked in the story, and I love those. That's the sad thing about DVDs beginning to disappear. I don't know if they'll record those commentaries in the way that they used to.
That's what podcasting's for, my man.
Let's do a commentary right now.
But I mean, you start to learn, maybe not the specifics, but that would be a good podcast if you only talked to directors about a certain piece and you went through the piece.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be interesting.
There's a podcast where have you been on the one where they just dissect a joke?
No.
It's a great one. It's about like a routine, and so someone comes on and they just talk about the routine for an hour, how they wrote it, what it means, and then it's a great way to talk about all that person's theories.
We do something on this show. We pay tribute to people we've lost recently, roast in peace, and we'll do that at the end.
Okay.
And there's, you're the kind of guy that I can ask almost anything about, and you'll have some sort of take or opinion on it. But one thing we like to do is sort of stay in the news and see what's happening in the world. And if you'll indulge us and join us, please, it's time for Touchy Subjects.
Touchy Subjects.
All right. Was it just Netanyahu? We're just going to talk about Netanyahu for an hour and a half?
Yahoo Serious, actually.
I can't form a government with these meeskites.
Well, similar.
And what's first?
Someone very close to Netanyahu, Mr. Jimmy Carter, says that there should be an age limit to be president. At 94 years old, Jimmy Carter thinks that he would not have been able to handle the duties of the president of the United States when he was 80 years old.
Wow.
Biden, Bernie, and Trump will surpass that age mark if they're elected.
Interesting.
What do you guys think?
I completely agree. And I'm friends with a lot of old people. And I think
I'm only friends with old people. And like
I think we're both like that. Like I'm friends with Norman Lloyd, who's about to turn 105,
right?
Who was in Trainwreck, and people know him from St. Elsewhere and Dead Poets Society. And I love all those guys like Carl Reiner and Mel Brooks, and they still do amazing work. But we don't want any of them doing that work.
Yeah.
You
want them passing on the knowledge to the people that are doing the work.
But I know Mel Brooks has been working on Young Frankenstein, the musical, and he was saying a while back he had all these ideas, and I don't know, he's putting it up somewhere, and that's great, but that's not the nuclear codes.
Right.
And I know as a 51-year-old, I'm mushy now. I mean, how many? I got plates on the left side of my kitchen and glasses on the right. And when I'm looking for a glass, half the time I'm at the plate section. So you ever watch all these politicians and think, how do they know any of this? There's so many countries, and you think, how do they know any of their names, much less what's happening there? I mean, you walk into the Comedy Cellar, you see these comedians all the time. There's hundreds of them. And every night you probably can't remember the names of a third of them.
Of course. And some of them you've known your whole life.
And how can the brain work that well? And I think there probably are people who can do it, but just to be safe, let's not let them.
Yeah.
That would be my position. What age is the question?
That's what's the cutoff? It's at 35 to 75?
I think 80 is not a bad cutoff.
What happens if it's in the middle of your term?
Well, then they have to give it up. The day they turn 80, it's over.
Jimmy Carter should know. It's like a driver's license. He should have to. Jimmy Carter should know. He knew Mr. Peanut before the monocle and the cane.
Oh, gee. He sold that peanut farm, but when he became president, so that he wouldn't have any conflicts. That's true. Trump kept everything. Jimmy Carter sold a peanut farm because he didn't want to have an emoluments issue.
Trump sold Rhode Island.
He had to get rid of the beauty pageant.
He's going to franchise the whole United States of Belgium. We're going to have. He's going to sell us all for parts.
He has normalized everything. He wants to buy hunks of countries, and no one is freaked out. He's like, "Can I buy part of your country?" And he's mad that you won't sell part of your country to him.
Right.
He's furious about it. I'm not even visiting you because you won't sell me a hunk of your country.
Right.
Well, at least he's not invading.
He's not invading. Yeah. He doesn't seem to really want to invade, although you never know. He only has to do it once.
It's terrifying.
But he doesn't seem to have the inclination.
I have a theory that
invade.
he's just as afraid of starting a war as he was to entering the military. I think it's the one thing that it's like, I don't quite get this. If I start a war, I might get reelected, but I'm going to have to visit the wounded and visit the troops.
Yeah.
I got infuriated, like when he first came in to power. We'll say, like, I remember asking a couple Democratic senators at a fundraiser, like, what are you doing to romance the military? He's going to go over to these forward operating bases in the Middle East and rile everybody up. He didn't for over a year. And I remember the press was harassing him. Oh, another Christmas and Thanksgiving goes by and Trump hasn't visited the troops. And I kept saying, shut up.
Yes.
Don't give him the idea. Don't mock him into doing it. Let him not do it. And then, of course, he goes and it's a big hit.
But he clearly, you're right, he doesn't like being around situations where he has to have feelings and compassion for people. And that would be a funny way to save hundreds of thousands of lives, which is he doesn't want to start a war because he doesn't want to visit anyone. And that literally might be the thing that saves the world, is his lack of interest in like going to a hospital and saying, how you doing? I remember when he was on Howard Stern, he talked about how he never changed a diaper on any of his kids. And he said it was so much pride, like it was an incredible accomplishment,
Right.
when in fact it's really demented.
Right.
But that's also why he doesn't want to be in war, because it does require
It's dirty.
caring for people and getting
He'll
involved.
have to change the diapers.
I've always said, I think he thinks like dealing with the heads of other countries is like negotiating with a beer distributor. Like he's just like, get me in a room with the guy. Yeah, I'll figure it out. I don't need anyone else to do it. Just get him in the room with me. And it's never worked out. He's never figured out anything in a room with the guy that that's what he thinks.
The business, I believe he considers America just another asset in his portfolio, and he thinks that we're lucky to have him as our agent, essentially.
Yeah, I
And
agree.
I do believe that. And that's why I was so scared early on when everybody said, well, no, he can't hire his family. You got to pull his family away, pull his phone away. I was like, no. That's like pushing a rat into a corner.
Yeah.
Don't throw him off like that.
Yeah.
He let him sort of do it.
However he does it, let him do it.
Yeah, I mean, none of his buildings have fallen down. You know, and I do think he's terribly underestimated. I do worry about that people underestimate him. I mean, this is a guy who built skyscrapers. They took 10 years. Yeah. He's very patient, methodical, and people say, oh, he's willy-nilly and he's on Twitter and it's Twitter diplomacy and he's making decisions, whoever the last person to talk to. I don't believe that. I believe that he is much smarter than people.
Well, I think the fascinating thing about him is, even after all these years, no one actually knows how his mind works.
Right.
No one knows his level of compassion. No one knows his level of intelligence. We were all like, wait a second, he doesn't read. He doesn't read books. He doesn't want to read the security information, but yet obviously he's succeeding in certain ways. And you wonder, does he, like right now, he clearly likes to flood the zone. Yeah. He's just flooding the zone all day long. There's so many problems, so many ways he's kind of telling everyone to fuck off and resisting. You can't go in front of Congress and answer their questions. And I'm allowed to talk to the head of Ukraine and promise them anything. But there's so many of them that 2 days later, they're always forgotten. And is that just how his mind works? Or does he actually know as a theory, this is how you do it? Or is it just his instinct as a human animal? What do you think?
They could be both.
Yeah.
It actually could be both. He just happens to understand that and fits into the algorithms of how business goes and how the media understands the 24-hour news cycle. And I always think that he's, or at least somebody helping him, is one step ahead of the press. There's this whole thing now where we pulled this spy out of Russia 2 years ago, and everybody's wondering what happened and why. And part of me wonders if it wasn't him who did that, because he was doing a favor for Putin.
Yeah. Or
he found out we have a spy there and said, you know what? No, we don't. We're pulling him out.
Well, he doesn't like spies.
Well,
I mean, he said publicly, like, he's against the concept of spies.
Right.
So he was ratting them out.
Yes, it's so interesting. I'm excited for 6 years from now, let's say, but it could be 2 years, when all the books come out. I mean, I can't wait for the Melania book, or all the people who really spent time with him, because it's probably so much crazier and more terrifying and funnier. Like, we're getting 2% of what's happening right now.
So you can't wait to be in your bunker in an undisclosed location reading an unpublished, handwritten account of Melania's book that was smuggled out of Washington. Okay, good for you. What's next, Ed? Shout out to Jimmy Carter, 94 years old, still building houses for people. Habitat for Humanity. What's next, Ed?
Oh, there's a little controversy on reality television today. Sean Spicer on Dancing with the Stars. A lot of people are very upset that feel like they're normalizing a man who used to lie for the president. Oof. I don't know if you guys saw it or not. He did like a Cuban salsa thing. He played the bongos. He wore a lime green puffy shirt.
No.
All the judges had the same report. He was offbeat but fun. They each scored him 4, and he got a 12 out of 30 score.
Oh, he did better than I did on that show, so I can't say much. But
he actually got the same score as you.
It's like Haldeman. He's a fun dancer. Ehrlichman's mambo is incredible. G. Gordon Liddy doing the samba.
people are mad at Dancing with the Stars for normalizing Sean Spicer, but I'm mad at Sean Spicer for normalizing Dancing with the Stars. We already know he can't dance around reporters' questions, so I don't know how his samba dancing's going to be. Yeah, no, he's finally lying to himself if he thinks he can dance.
Yeah, it's a funny area, this, how do we feel about
The people who quit.
people who assisted dark stuff? Do we think like, they got stuck in a position that they didn't realize how bad it was going to be? Or are they really a part of, caging children? And do we want them dancing on our variety shows? And it's a funny debate. Like, do we want Scaramucci dancing? Do we want Sean Spicer, being funny? I remember at the Emmys, they brought out Spicer. And, some people were really mad. And then other people were just getting selfies with him.
Right.
I don't really have strong feelings about that issue. I don't think I remember getting a picture with Sarah Palin. So I was at some Time magazine thing, and I just said, let's go get it. Let's go get a picture with Sarah Palin.
That means you're a comedian because you see the irony, you see the craziness of it. Somewhere I have a picture of me and Donald Rumsfeld.
Yes, yeah.
And being a comedian gives you a backstage pass to the world. You're a witness to history, so you need to document that.
Yeah.
A couple years ago, I ran into Trump right before he got inaugurated, and I took a picture with him because I had just come back from a USO tour to Iraq, and we had a very weird, crazy conversation. A few minutes.
Did not make you feel good about the future.
It did not make me feel good. I told him I just came back from Iraq, and I was telling him how wonderful his chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Joe Dunford, is, and what an amazing experience I had in Iraq. And Trump said, "How was it over there? A mess? Anyway, how do you think Arnold's going to do on Celebrity Apprentice?"
Oh, my God. Oh.
So
what do we do with that? What do we do with that?
Yeah.
It's a weird moment in time. Does it ever mess you up comedically? Sometimes I feel like I've been thrown in a blender, and just the amount of stuff happening as a comedian makes it hard to, write a good joke about something pointless because there's so much going on. But if you write about what's going on, it changes every second, and it's really dispiriting. Like, it makes you depressed to think about it. I was watching Mark Maron the other day, and his set was so hysterical. He just decided to go right at it. Uh-huh. And he had been avoiding politics in his act for the most part, not going too hard at it in recent years. And the new set, he does a fair amount about it, and it's amazing. He's like, I guess I'm just going to get into it. And I'm thrilled watching him, but I know for me, it makes me like numb and, stressed to the point of passing out. It doesn't help me be funny.
I guess everybody has a different, for me, I'm starting to have, Trumpitis, like fatigue. And I think a lot of people are having a hard time with that type of humor, with watching the news. It becomes exhausting. CNN is full of opinion. Fox is full of opinion. It becomes exhausting. But it's because for 2 years I obsessed.
Yeah.
I did not watch a movie or a TV show. I only watched the news, read the news. And for some people, it's the opposite. They were tuned out. They were in denial. Maybe this is what happened with Mark Maron. And now they're going, wow, I need to wake up and talk about this so that I can have some influence and get it off my chest and get through it. It's an incredible thing.
But when the world is so weird and, let's say, darkly comic, it does make you feel unnecessary at times. Like I just made a movie with, I made a movie with Pete Davidson and Bill Burr and Marissa Tomei this summer.
Right.
And it's a personal story. It's not true, but it's inspired by events from Pete's life. And Pete's dad was a firefighter who lost his life as a first responder on 9/11. And I was able to...
We all saw the Justin Bieber roast.
Exactly. That's how people know. And it's a very personal, emotional movie, but it's about sacrifice. It's about, why do people do this? Why do people put themselves in a position where they may give their lives for other people? So it's a comedy, but it's, about how a family handles having lost a hero. And I liked in this moment of madness to focus on that there are people who are good, who are willing to walk in that building, and all the issues that arise from that. So it was a way to turn off politics to get to something different, which in a way is connected to the Garry book. It's connected to what you were talking about. At some point in your life, you think, I'm more interested in how we're all connected and how we can help each other than the war and the fight and trying to get ahead of everybody else. And the ego part.
I always say I spend my 40s apologizing for shit I did and said in my 30s.
Yeah.
As soon as you get it to a certain place, you can sort of... I wonder if Garry would have been so generous if he hadn't made it so big. If the struggle was still very real for him, if he was still trying to get that late night spot, or, we know comedians like that who are still in the fight.
Yeah, you have to have some aspect of your career, not for everybody, but for a lot of people, you almost see the light as a result of your success. You climb and you climb and you think, I'm going to be so happy when I get this, when I star in a show or I get on the Tonight Show, whatever your dream is. And then when you get it, you instantly realize it did not serve the emotional purpose you thought it would. I am not happy. That did not mean, I'm glad I accomplished it, but it didn't really do the thing that I thought would heal me.
Right.
And you realize, maybe it's not about servicing myself. It's more about framing this differently with how I'm there for other people and give to other people. But you do need to accomplish something to see that a lot of people. There's definitely people who haven't succeeded who are incredibly charitable and giving and loving.
Well, Garry, who didn't have children, seems to have had 100 children.
Yes.
And that's the Sarah Silvermans and the Sully McCulloughs and the Judd Apatow and Bruce and so many of his friends that he mentored and played basketball with and took care of in so many different ways. And you saw the love.
And that was conscious. I saw in his journal, it said on a page, grow old gracefully, become a mentor gracefully. So he wasn't just helping people because he was a nice guy. It was a thought in his mind to do that. And it wasn't, I need to make another Larry Sanders show.
Right.
He was just as happy to kick around, jokes with Sacha Baron Cohen for his latest movie and help him crack a story problem. He didn't need another success like that. But I do think that's very common, that you succeed and you're just so disappointed with how it makes you feel that you have to make some sort of life change. That's why all these people succeed. You see it every day on TV. It's like Bieber or someone, they succeed and then they're instantly miserable and spiraling and pissing in buckets. And then they're looking for something, Suddenly Bieber's at church all the time because he did it all and it didn't really feel great.
Right.
Except Rod Stewart, he still likes to party. Still working for him.
Shout out to Biebs, Rod Stewart, and I guess Sean Spicer for stepping out of his comfort zone of lying to the American public so that he could lie to himself and Dancing with the Stars. What's next, Ed?
All right, next up. Today is the global climate strike. There's students all across the world leaving school today, and the leader is Greta Thunberg. And she was talking to Congress this week. The Swedish 16-year-old climate activist appeared in front of Congress before a hearing on climate change just days after she met with former President Barack Obama.
Wow.
She was quoted as saying, "I'm submitting this report as my testimony because I don't want you to listen to me. I want you to listen to the scientists. And I want you to unite behind the science. And then I want you to take real action." Thunberg first made a name for herself while staging weekly sit-ins outside the Swedish parliament, which led to more than 100 similar protests worldwide. Instead of taking a plane to the U.S. To cut down on emissions, Thunberg actually spent 2 weeks sailing across the Atlantic on a zero-emissions sailboat. She's a hero. I personally love her.
Yeah, she's pretty great. My kids are doing that right now. They left. Well, one kid. I have one kid in school.
They went to the...
And she was doing the walkout.
Wow.
But it wasn't really that rebellious. She's like, "Dad, can you email the school and tell them I'm allowed to leave at 11 for the walkout?"
Really?
So I don't think she was getting in much trouble. The school's emailing back, "It's okay." Like,
Isn't that what it's going to take? It's going to take the
Yes.
kids to create any sort of change and safety net for themselves. We're not going to do it for them.
well, that's
just not possible.
That's the bad part about just humanity is we're not great at making sacrifices 50 years in advance for other people.
Right.
We just want to drive our big cars and fly in jets.
Some
and
people
not
want to
worry
do
about
it, but it's a tough sell.
Just
it's
Ed
a
Begley.
very tough
Only
sell.
Ed Begley. He's the only one that really wants to do
He's
it.
doing great work. I love Ed Begley.
Oh, he's the best.
But this girl, Greta Thunberg, this girl's great. I'll always remember her after she is killed by the remaining Koch brother.
When David Koch died, the first thing I thought is, see, these guys all think they won't die.
Right.
And they operate like they're immortal. And so he's fighting so hard for his candidates to win and giving all this money as if he's going to live forever. He's not going, I probably got 2-3 years left. What can I really do to make the world better with these billions? He left all the billions. He could have put all that energy into something
Right.
productive, not fighting against regulations that
Right.
keep the world
Right.
clean.
He was not for anything.
No. Well, I'm sure in his mind he was. I would listen to an interview with him. He had all sorts of theories, but it does feel like he thought, I'm never going to die, and I have to win every fight every day on all these things that I believe in. But ultimately, he just made the world filthy and then died.
But isn't that what someone probably said at his memorial? Like, he fought till the end.
Yeah, for the freedom for companies to decide for themselves how to regulate themselves because they can be trusted to do whatever they want.
Oh boy. Well, shout out to the people that are out at that walkout today, including some Apatows and Greta Thunberg, who was very, very prolific and great in front of the Senate yesterday.
Oh, wow.
I watched some of that, and she would have been a major part of Freaks and Geeks had she existed
Sure.
back
Yeah.
then, don't you think?
Smart kid going up against the power. You know, that senator who seems to be talking down to her. And he's like, yeah, but China doesn't do it, so why should we do it?
Right.
And then she's just like, well, China could say that about us. So then nothing is ever going to happen.
Right.
You're our China.
The wisdom of a child. That's what you need sometimes.
All right, what's next, Ed?
Justin Trudeau.
This one's juicy, Judd.
Mm-hmm.
This one's juicy.
I need some info on it because I
This is truly a
vaguely
touchy
heard
subject.
about this the other day.
I heard about this, and I stayed up all night deleting all my old blackface photos because this stuff comes out.
How long did that take?
It took half a day because, I was a big Bill Cosby fan as a kid, and I went trick-or-treating every year.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pictures of me in the Cosby sweater, and no. Justin Trudeau...
Not the sweatsuit? You didn't do the sweatsuit version?
What-
Cosby as a gym coach outfit?
I was thinking that would be funny if he was wearing a prison jumpsuit made completely out of Cosby sweater material.
Now, what under what circumstances was he doing it?
Doing
Wearing blackface.
Trudeau. Justin Trudeau, the leader, the Prime Minister of Canada. Tell the story, Ed.
He wore brownface at a 2001 Arabian Nights gala when he was a teacher. He was a teacher at the West Point Grey Academy in Canada, not our West Point, their West Point. And it was a private day school where Trudeau was a teacher. Trudeau says he knows now that the decision to dress up in brownface and wear a turban for a gala at a private school where he worked 18 years ago was a racist thing to do, and he is now deeply sorry. He also admitted there's a second instance of racist behavior. When he was in high school, he dressed up in a talent show and sang Deo with makeup on.
And there might be a third one, they said.
How many years ago is this?
2001.
What year was the Ted Danson scandal?
That would have been in 95 or 96.
Yeah. So it was on people's radar. We kind of don't do this anymore.
No.
But yet, here is a very, very educated, privileged, by all means, not looking to be impolite. He must have thought it was funny.
Yeah.
Or would be provocative at the party. This is not an unearthed photo from someone's closet. This was in the yearbook.
Yeah.
So he did not.
Oh, it was in
think-
Justin Trudeau's yearbook.
Yeah, it was in the school's yearbook.
How come no
he
one
was in the
caught it till
faculty.
now?
People probably knew about it but didn't really care. And also, it wasn't necessarily blackface. It was brownface. He was dressed like a Latin.
He was just like Aladdin.
Yeah.
He also did no, for real. He did Deo in high school. He said,
Yeah.
as
Harry Belafonte.
Harry Belafonte in high school.
I'm trying to think about when I was a kid and would do things that were performative, let's say. I remember being at summer camp, and there was a talent show. I was maybe 11 or 10, and I put on my mother's negligee, and I sang Sweet Transvestite
Right.
from Rocky Horror
Right.
Picture Show.
Right. How'd you do I?
Exactly.
See you
I very
met my-
proudly did it. I don't know exactly what my motivation was.
I did it too.
One of the great moments of my childhood was putting on that negligee. But I don't think I would have done that, what Justin Trudeau did. But I'm trying to think if I was smart enough to know why not to do that. But I also was 10. I wasn't 30 years old.
And a teacher at a private school. So
Yeah.
my case is if somebody, my thought on this is if Justin Trudeau, who's a faculty member, and by the way, I don't know, you saw the picture. He still looks very handsome, even in brownface. It's remarkable. If he doesn't know better, how are regular, not quite as privileged? His father was the prime minister of. He grew up knowing what you would think was everything, and it comes to mind now that Prince Harry wore a Nazi uniform at a costume party once.
Yes.
So they're trying to be provocative.
As did Keith Moon like to dress up in Nazi outfits
Now,
to shock
If you
his
didn't
friends.
know it was wrong, it's just like a crime, right? Intention, right, is everything. If you accidentally kill somebody or you purposely kill somebody, it's a big difference
Yes.
in how you're judged. Now, if you don't know it's wrong, would we cancel him now for what he did 18, 19 years ago, not knowing it? Okay, he should have known better, but he didn't.
I think the interesting thing is that
Is
when
there
people-
hope for us to do the right thing all the time if this guy of privilege is making this mistake?
I think part of it is I think when people get in trouble for certain things, they have an inability to talk about it honestly. I don't think we've seen a lot of people get in trouble and say, here was my mindset in this moment where we believed them. So I don't know what Justin Trudeau's saying. I think he's saying he doesn't remember. Is that what someone said, that he's saying he doesn't even remember?
He brought up the second instance himself. He was like, you know what, there's also this other time. I don't know if a picture's going to show up, but I did it twice.
Yeah.
He's copping to it completely and apologizing.
Because there's two ways to look at it. One is you're being rebellious by doing something shocking. The other is you're completely oblivious that something is offensive and you're just being ignorant.
Right.
And people don't tend to know how to speak honestly about what was in their mind.
Well, then theoretically, under your thought, he should have brought it up a year ago or 10 years ago or when he was running.
Yeah. If he knew that.
Well, how do you forget you wore blackface 3 times?
Do you think he was terrified his entire career that there were photos about to come out?
I think it probably was. Well, he also was in these private places where they protect each other. Rich people protect each other, even if it's uncomfortable. I would hate to see this guy go down over something that he didn't do maliciously.
Yeah.
I'd really hate to see that happen.
Does it seem like it's going to? Well, like where's it headed?
There's an election coming up.
There's an election coming up, and it's problematic.
I'll say another question. Is he a good prime minister? Which I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, Canada seems like they're on the level.
He's very popular.
Yeah.
They got good health care. I know he didn't do it, but he's keeping it there. They just legalized marijuana.
Yeah.
You know, crime is low. Seems like they're doing a good job.
And he's seemingly an ally to women's issues and indigenous people, and if anything, he's been accused of cultural appropriation. When he was in India, his family dressed in Indian traditional clothing, which I always struggle with too, because that's the ultimate tribute. That means I want to immerse in what this is and pay tribute to the beauty of the history of this culture, and then they get hit for cultural appropriation. So you have to be a stiff wearing a suit everywhere you go.
But so they're in India. How often were they wearing?
At a ceremony. They wore it for his whole family. Wore it for a ceremony.
And people are mad about that.
They were, when that first happened.
It's like if you go to Japan and your girl wants to dress up like a geisha, you know, it's like, and you pay Japanese people and they dress them up and they take pictures and stuff like that.
And is that wrong?
I don't know.
I don't think so, but a lot of people say that is now. The same way I posted, not too long ago, an old picture of me and Snoop Dogg, and it was a Thanksgiving photo, a throwback photo, and he had a Native American headdress on, and people were like, Snoop can't do that. He's not Native American. I'm like...
It's interesting because someone was pointing out to me that for most of these things, people don't realize where they came from. Right? So they might think, the whole world loves blue jeans. But clearly one country created blue jeans. Is that cultural appropriation for the rest of the world that wears blue jeans? Like certain foods that we think came from Italy but came from Egypt.
Right. They made pizzas from China.
That it's all a little bit more mixed up than anyone wants to acknowledge, just in terms of cultural appropriation.
How can we call ourselves a melting pot and then... If I'm a Native American 10-year-old, theoretically, I'm not. So I'm. This is hypothetical, and I see a picture of Snoop wearing a Native American headdress. I go, "That's so cool! Yeah. He knows who we are. He's honoring my ancestors."
I think it's different if Snoop wears it than if you wear it.
Why?
Because black people didn't kill Native Americans like we did.
But what if a Native American wears a James Perth shirt?
And he's got good taste.
I mean, on a lot of these issues, I don't have very strong opinions either way. But the thing that makes me sad, because this relates to music as well, is I do like to think we're all part of the human race. We're all inventing things and designing things, and there's fashion, there's science, and there's technology. And the great thing is that we all get to take a piece of it, make something new out of it. And so, if there's like a haircut, and someone in my family is like, you can't wear your hair like that. People get mad at you because that's from, certain people. It's kind of a bummer because that's the fun part of being alive is,
tasting, learning, seeing.
Bob
smelling.
Dylan always says everything he did, he stole from the people before him.
Right.
When he wins an award, he's like, no, that was from Woody Guthrie, and that was so-and-so. And I just expanded on something that I heard. And so I guess there are situations where things are clearly wrong, but those hard lines being built around everything is tough. And you see it in acting. Everyone's debating, like, do you need that kind of person to play that part? Are we now locked in that every actor and actress can only play exactly what they are?
Right. Then that's not acting anymore.
I'm 80% Ashkenazi.
That's Ray Romano on Everybody Loves Raymond. That's the range you're going to give that's Seinfeld on Seinfeld. That's the range. You're going to say the same thing to Scarlett Johansson, who can morph into anyone, or Robert De Niro can't play a disabled person or a Mexican
Well,
person.
Marlon Brando was Cuban, wasn't
Right.
he?
Red Buttons got the first Oscar that a comic ever got for playing an Asian or Japanese person.
Well, that was terrible. You just flipped my whole opinion on this when you brought up the Red Buttons performance. You can't mention Mickey Rooney. They're all terrible there.
Well, what about Will Smith? What about Will Smith going out in blueface for Aladdin? Were the Smurfs protesting?
Yeah, it's a fascinating issue.
Shout out to Justin of Arabia. I hope he survives all this. Last one, Ed. Last one.
Last one.
Make it a fun one.
This one's for you, Judd.
Yes.
Because it takes place in Staten Island.
Oh, boy.
We're just to give it some. We are in Judd's editing offices here, doing our remote thick skin, where Judd is editing a movie. Is it called Staten Island?
We don't know. I can't think of a good name.
That is not a good name.
We shot on Staten Island, and every night I would go to the Comedy Cellar and do a set. And I would say, I'm shooting a movie on Staten Island. Is anyone from Staten Island? Silence. Anyone want to go to Staten Island? Silence. Every night, all summer. It is like an island unto itself. I loved it. I thought the people there were super cool, and it just seems very suburban, and I had the best time. But I guess there's not really anything there that would make people go there. There's no attraction. There's no
I
great
grew up
adventure.
a few miles away in New Jersey, and I never would go there except to cut through to go to Brooklyn to visit my Aunt Bess.
Yeah.
When she wasn't playing Mojong with your grandma Molly.
Exactly. Even though we didn't talk about that, our Mojong connection between our families.
Even their baseball team is the shitty Yankees.
Yes. That's right. They changed their name to the Pizza Rats one day a month. They did on Staten Island. The Staten Island Yankees had a contest to rename the team for one night, and everyone voted the Pizza Rats, and it was so popular that they now do it all the time. You didn't talk about the connection between our.
Okay, well, let's finish this thing, and then we can do that.
There was
Tell him what happened in Staten Island.
25,000 bees.
He thinks it's so great. Tell him what happened. Tell him what happened.
25,000 bees were removed from the Staten Island ferry terminal awning. A swarm of bees were spotted by a police officer who called the NYPD beekeeping unit to come and alleviate the problem. No people or bees were harmed in the process.
Well, I still like it. They say they have a lot of bees. That's good.
Yeah.
You need bees. The bees are disappearing.
Wow. I want to know whose job is. How many bees?
25,000.
Who the fuck counts the bees?
Yes. How do they know?
We have some bees on the ferry. We need a bee counter and then a bee removal team so we know how many bees they need to remove.
How do they know the density of bees?
I think it's official the NYPD has too much money.
Yes.
They have a beekeeping, but I'm glad you had a good experience there because I don't know a lot about Staten Island other than the one time Pete made a joke about it. They were all very sensitive to it, and I always thought of it as a cut through. There was just nothing there. It was this weird hybrid of Jersey and Brooklyn. Like there was good pizza, but
Yeah. You know what? It's not a bad ride to the city.
okay.
It's not as far as I thought, but I guess I'm going against traffic because I'm going from the city to Staten Island. Maybe the traffic's bad getting in the city. But I just thought it was nice, and a lot of Staten Island has the most gorgeous view of New York City you've ever seen.
Really?
Yeah.
So there's all these, odd neighborhoods with like the $1 billion view of Manhattan.
But it's just the view because I feel like the people from Staten Island are like, I'm not going to the city. There's no parking. Everything's so expensive. I like to look at it from over here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They got a theater there. Blue Oyster Cult shows up every once in a while. That's enough.
Maybe this is maybe you're going to change Staten Island. Maybe you're going to maybe I don't know what the movie's about, but if Pete's a favorite son and you have your magic touch, Judd, maybe this will be a reinvention,
It's going
a
to be
reimaging
it's
of
a new
Staten
Brooklyn.
Island.
It's a new Brooklyn.
It's
a
the
new Greenpoint.
Brooklyn. And Brooklyn is the new Manhattan.
See, it's
See,
all
it's
inverting.
all moving up a notch. It's a feature film that you wrote with Pete Davidson and
Dave Cyrus.
and you just wrapped it and you're editing it now. And I love Pete Davidson. I truly do adore him. He's still a very young guy. He's got a bright future. What was it? Was it his idea, or did you just recognize something in him? And
Well, I always, when I work
you
with
did this a
people-
few years, with Amy Schumer,
Yeah.
where she wrote Trainwreck, and you recognized something in her that people may not have seen, that maybe she saw first, now, and you directed her into a big movie star. Now, is that what's happening with Pete? Like, what is it from a piece of raw talent, let's just say, beyond, a friendship in the comedy community? What is it that makes you pick a certain person or a certain idea?
I met Pete when we were doing Trainwreck because Amy was like, "You got to see this guy. He's 20 years old. It's insane how funny he is." And I got to know him. He just did a cameo, but then we became friends and worked on one script. And then at some point, as usually happens, we just start talking about, what's the real story you should be writing about. And so with Amy, we started talking about relationships and why she thought that some of them were not going as well as she wanted them to, and just had very real talks about what those issues were. And it was the same thing with Pete. It's you just start with, how you doing? What do you think, messed you up? What traumatized you? What would get you through it? How do you think you would heal? And we just imagine a scenario that taps into real stuff, and then we create a fictional story around it. A lot of times it's the imagining of what would health look like and what might happen to me that could get me there.
Wow.
That's a lot of my stories are, imagining I learned the lesson I'm supposed to learn. What story would teach me that?
And how do you know when the script is done? How do you when you
You
go,
don't-
Pete? I think Pete and Dave. I think you got it. I think you got it. Let's start.
Yeah, you don't. And also we were rewriting every day of the entire shoot. And now we're in post and we're recutting and tossing certain scenes and going, I don't think that scene's the last scene of the movie. I actually think it's this scene that came 8 scenes earlier. We should flip it to the end.
Of course.
And it never ends till you lock it.
And do you show it to people along the way, or do you put the scenes up on a big board? And
Yeah.
yeah,
All of it. You show it to 50 people, then you show it to 100 people, then you show it to 400 people. And each time you make notes and you talk to them about what they're responding to emotionally, and then you're listening to see if they laugh where you wanted them to. But it's a more intimate story than I've done before. It's not as hard a comedy. I think it's a funny movie, but it's a much more emotional movie.
Well, Grandma Molly, who sadly did not make it to see your Staten Island movie, but did live to see much of your success. She, I bring her up because when I was an open micer, I don't even know if I told Ed about this.
No.
My cousin Ed here, but when I was in my early 20s, I started comedy kind of on a fluke. My pal Mark Chapin, who was just here last week for the roast and everything, he said, you're funny. You should try this comedy class that I took. And I got into it, and I told my Aunt Bess about what I was doing, and she was one of the few family members that didn't roll her eyes and laugh in my face. And she was supportive, and she would come see me at Pat's Jazz Bar downtown. I don't even think it's there anymore, on 23rd Street or 14th Street. It was on one of those big, wide streets. And she had a great sense of humor, and she would always laugh at the setups, and she wanted to educate me on comedy, so she took me to see Jackie Mason's Broadway show, and
Awesome.
she loved it so much that she would laugh at the setups. It was almost distracting to Jackie Mason. I was an open micer, but I could tell that she was kind of tripping him up a little bit. She was howling so hard. And she had a lot of comedy roots. She, even before that, when I was a little kid, she took me to the Carnegie Deli. I was basically orphaned as a teenager, so my Aunt Bess was a big cultural influence. She would take me to the theater, and we would stop at a restaurant, usually a kosher steakhouse or the Carnegie Deli. And one time we walked in, and there was Henny Youngman sitting near the entranceway.
Oh, man.
And she said, and he knew her. I couldn't believe it. Oh, Bess. And Bess was like, how's your sister? Blah, 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 blah. Next thing I know, Henny Youngman's handing me a card that I still have that says, here's my pride and joy. You want to see a picture of my pride and joy? And it was a picture of Pride detergent and Joy, whatever that dishwasher detergent.
That's
And
in
a
King of Comedy. They stole that joke.
And a second card that just had his name and a music note on it, because he played violin when he did his one-liners. But anyway, my Aunt Bess was a big influence on me, one of my dearest relatives. She was also the subject of my earliest stand-up. I would talk about my Aunt Bess and how she was always rooting for me to date a Jewish woman, but she would never want to just come out and ask me if she was Jewish, so she'd be passive-aggressive. I didn't catch her last name, dear. And I'd be like, Hitler, Aunt Bess. That's Jennifer Hitler of the Massapequa Hitlers. It was always, and I would talk about when I was a little kid, and she would take me shopping, and I'd watch her bra shop, and she'd have to fold her boobs in half to get them into the brassiere. And a lot of good old-fashioned Jewish humor came out of my Aunt Bess. But in real life, she would often, this is all real life, but she would also brag about her friend Molly, whose grandson, her Mojong buddy, I guess they were playing, was it Mojong or Canasta? Mojong, out in Brooklyn. My Aunt Bess lived out in Brooklyn, where I imagine your grandmother lived.
At some point, I mean, they all start there.
and I'd hear about this guy, though this is like pre-internet, pre-Google, pre-YouTube, so you didn't really know what was going on, but I would hear about this guy. Oh, maybe you'll run into my friend Molly's grandson, Judd, who's doing stand-up. Now, at this point, 89, 90, 91, I'm not sure if you're in L.A. You're probably still on the East Coast doing
89?
stand-up.
No, I was in L.A.
And I was like, who is this wonder boy that I keep hearing about? And over time, you became a real person. Oh, that's a real person that they were all bragging about. And I may even have met your grandmother when I went to pick up my aunt one time. I have vague memories of walking into a game, and they were all there, and I picked up my aunt to take her somewhere. Yeah. We were very close. Basically, I was her date, her plus one. We would go to Broadway shows together, and you were this guy that I had to aspire to meet up with, to understand, to connect with, and now here we are. So
we're still in it.
It all comes full circle, my friend. It really does. Thank you for what you do for the comedians. Thank you for what you're doing for the world. All the good deeds you're doing, Judd. Not just with your work, but with your charities and stuff like that. And I wanted to quickly just mention Gary Goldman's new stand-up special, which premieres in November.
October 5.
October 5, sorry. Yeah. The book comes out in November. And Gary Goldman, who I love, it's called The Great Depression. Is that what he's calling it?
Yes.
It's about his battles with depression. Gary Goldman's a super funny guy. You produced this for him?
Yes.
Did you direct this one?
I did not. Michael Bonfiglio, who directed the Avett Brothers documentary and the Dwight Gooden Darryl Strawberry 30 for 30 with me. Very cool. He directed it.
That is very cool. Well, shout out to Gary Goldman, really super funny guy. What we do on this show is we always pay tribute to somebody we care about, somebody that we lost recently. And this one's a tough one because I know you really cared about this guy. So it's time for Roast in Peace.
This week on Roast in Peace, we're honoring Ric Ocasek. He was the lead vocalist, rhythm guitarist, and songwriter for the great rock and roll band The Cars. And he passed away last week. He was a wonderful man, and he died at the age of 75.
Well, folks, Rick is not Ocasek. The Cars' best-known hits were Toyota Corolla, Buick LeSabre, Cadillac Eldorado, and I think you Googled the wrong cars. The Cars were the perfect mix of rock, punk, 80s synth, and cocaine. One of the Cars' biggest hits is called Drive. How did they ever think of that? In my opinion, they were the greatest band to ever come out of Boston. Unless, of course, you count Aerosmith, the Pixies, the Jay Giles Band, the Mighty Mighty Bosstones, Godsmack, Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch, and, of course, Boston. The Cars were the hottest band with the ugliest members. If you've never seen Rick before, he looked like Howard Stern dressed as Pat Benatar for Halloween. Ric Ocasek had heart problems, too much Candy-O, not enough Veggio. Poor Rick passed away from heart failure, so his last words were, "You gave me just what I needed, except a defibrillator."
Oh, jeez.
We go deep, Joe. We go deep.
like it.
This is
I like
therapy
it.
for me.
I feel better.
You feel better,
I
right?
wished it was about Eddie Money, but yes, I feel better.
It looks like Ric Ocasek from the Cars is totaled. So, Rick, since you're gone, we'll just have to remember you from some of the coolest music ever made. My Best Friend's Girl, Drive, Just What I Needed, Let the Good Times Roll, Moving in Stereo, Let's Go, and You're All I've Got Tonight. So, to the lead singer of the Cars, we say, roast in peace and rust in parts. Ric Ocasek. Thank you, Judd. You were a big fan. You love that guy.
Oh, I love the
I saw you
Cars.
tweet about him.
Because one of my great memories as a kid was driving around with my late mother in 1978, and she was the cool one who would buy cassettes of, the Police and bands that I never heard of. And one day she bought that Cars record, and we would listen to it nonstop. And that first Cars record, every single song is a killer.
Yeah.
It's just a perfect record, and they invented what 80s rock became. I mean, that's ground zero for all of that stuff.
One of the coolest things was seeing him on the street, on Newbury Street in Boston, when I was music director of my college radio station.
Oh, that's big.
And then you'd see the guys from Aerosmith pop out of this one place. You'd see every now and then Jay Giles would make a local, but I remember seeing Ric Ocasek walking down Newbury Street. Such a cool guy, and married to one of the most beautiful women in the world. So
Yeah.
and not a very attractive guy, married to a very beautiful woman. I see why you relate to him so much.
I do. All the stork-like people, I see him and I go, it's possible. Because sometimes I make movies and people say, a guy like that would never get that girl. And I usually say, well, it happened to me. I know it happened once that a goofy guy got the beautiful girl, but Ric Ocasek is a good example of that.
There is a beautiful, beautiful picture in this book, in the Garry Shandling book, of you walking behind Gary on a studio lot. And
Yes.
there's a half a face that I recognize as your lovely wife, Leslie Mann. And she's not looking at the big star Gary. She's looking back at his soldier.
Oh, it's so funny, that picture. I just found that photo.
And
I was
it's a
just online.
beautiful-
It's a shocking photo. I hadn't known my wife that long.
Here,
and
find it for me.
I think we're at like the MTV Movie Awards or something.
Yeah.
And Gary's walking, I'm behind him, and then she's just looking at me, and you only see half her face, like you said. And she just looks like she likes me so much that I put it in the book. I just wanted it to exist forever somewhere.
I caught it.
It's amazing that you caught it, because it's also the kind of, you think no one else is going to notice what this is, but you did.
I saw stuff in there that and I understand why you would put that in there, because it gives hope to all the average looking dudes.
Then you can have a woman look at you like that.
Yeah.
I feel like she's our Madeline Kahn.
Yeah, she's so funny. She really.
That's a nice thought.
She really is hilarious. But I know we'll find it. I'll find it for you. People need to buy the book on pre-order, and they'll be able to see my
It's Garry
life.
Shandling's book, edited by Judd Apatow. It comes out November 12th, and you can pre-order now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Penguin Random House. What a cool thing you did, man. It's not just a love letter. It's more than that, like I said. And
It's a good book to give anyone who wants to be a comedian or an artist. It's a great gift. It's the kind of thing I wish someone
it's set
gave
up like
me.
a gift. It's like a big old-fashioned high school textbook.
Yeah.
But you're not going to take it to you're gonna put it in your living room or on your desk, and you're going to read it in parts. You're going to read it in whole. If you care about Joan Rivers, if you care about Peter Tolan, Sarah Silverman, and the whole late night thing with Letterman and Leno, and I wonder if he forgave Jay. I did notice in one of his handwritten comments in here, he says, "Forgive Jay." who knows what and why
Yeah.
and where that all went down. I do feel like I had a small impact in Gary's life in that I did persuade, and maybe he'll shoot me for saying all this, but I did basically push Bob Saget into Garry Shandling at a party
Yeah.
on Sarah Silverman's roof once. Bob was always reluctant to go to that party because he didn't want to have any uncomfortable moments. And life, goes on and on and on, and this party comes and goes every year. And I'm
Yeah.
like, Bob, why don't you just come? Let's just go. Well, Gary will be there. I don't want to make it awkward for Sarah. And I said, fuck it. She doesn't care. A lot of people there. And I pushed him into Gary, and I walked away. And it seems like they had a healthy conversation. I don't know if they made peace necessarily. I don't know. Maybe they did. But I felt like I had a small positive impact in Gary's last times. And the last time I saw Gary was at a fundraiser for Senator Al Franken. And Gary was, he would always tease me, don't talk to me, I'm not talking to you, like I'm too big to talk to you. But the truth was, he was the best. He was so warm. The first time I ever met him was at the Comedy and Magic Club, years ago, and I'm nervous. There's Garry Shandling, and I'm going to go on, and it's not my home club. I'd never been there, but I immediately felt a connection to him. Talk about his generosity. This is a guy I did not know very well. He knew we had some friends that crossed over, but he immediately assessed that I had allergies, and they were killing me. And he pulled out a piece of paper from his comedy notebook, and he wrote down the name of an allergist. I mean, so generous. Like, I'm always afraid to part with my doctor's names because I want them to be available for me.
Yeah.
And
Especially a therapist.
yeah, and he did that for me. So, shout out to you for doing what you're doing for the comics and for Gary. Last question. I always ask people this, and it doesn't have to be anything intense or profound, but, we always say, life is hard. Let's get through it together. And you seem, from most people, you're a guy who seems to have it all. So there's got to be times when things aren't going well, Judd, or when you're feeling blue and you're feeling sad. Like, what do you do to pull yourself up and out of a depression?
Yeah.
Let's call it, or a sour moment. For me, it's just for me, they don't come often. But I always say it could be as simple as just getting myself off the couch, writing a new joke. It could be just putting Rodney Dangerfield's name into the YouTube search, and the sound of it helps me.
Sure.
Is there something that will always work for you? Something that you could sort of pass on to the thick-skinned listeners?
It's so funny because I was just talking about this because when I got back to edit the movie, I just got so scared about whether or not I pulled it off. And I won't know for months because that's what it's like when you make a movie. It's a giant jigsaw puzzle and you keep shuffling it around. But I hadn't started editing yet. I was just about to hit the editing room, and I just started getting crazy depressed, the emotional stakes of God, it would be great if you pulled this off. It would really suck if you didn't. I felt my chemicals changing, oh, this is pulling me down in a more serious chemical depression way. And so I had to think about that. What do I do now? And I always sit down and I just write. Just get up every morning and exercise. First thing. That's usually 80% of it. If I do that. I was
afraid you were going to say that.
Yeah.
What do you do?
It's just a treadmill. I just get on it, and I don't even want to be on it, but I'll just put it for walking. And if I walk for 8 minutes, for some reason, every time around 8-10 minutes, I get bored and I want to run a little bit. And then by the end, I'm kind of enjoying the run, and I always feel better the rest of the day. So I think exercise is a big thing. And meditation. And I have certain very pop culture self-help books I go to that just give me perspective.
Really?
And
you read them over and over?
Yeah, I'll just they'll just be highlighted, just an idea, and to just know that emotions are like waves in the ocean, and they just change. And if you just wait an hour, your mood changes. You're not as stuck in it as you think you are. Sometimes after a good night's sleep, suddenly you tune in. You're like, oh, I kind of don't feel like I felt yesterday, and that it even when you're down, it usually lifts.
That's wonderful. Well, that's certainly something everybody can do.
Yeah.
That's very, very good. That's very helpful. And thank you, Judd. All right, folks. Our emotional support humans. Give him a shirt, Eddie. Come on. Give him a shirt.
Love it.
He earned it.
What are you, large?
Extra large. Don't.
All right,
You know what I hate? The swag-free large shirt
Yeah.
that never fits, and you keep it in your closet
No,
for
we
years.
brought back up.
Well, we're out of extra large.
No.
All
We
right.
want two
Well,
extra large. We'll mail you an XL.
start exercising.
Here you go. Here, take this in case you get fat.
This is perfect.
All right. Lots of love for Judd Apatow.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. That was amazing. I fucking love Judd Apatow. It's Garry Shandling's book, edited and just put together by Judd Apatow with love. Comes out November 12th, and you can pre-order it now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and Penguin Random House. And Judd says go to low-level bookstores and get it there. I'm all about it, man. It's the perfect Christmas gift for any true comedy fan. It's very cool, and it's got all of the diary entries that you can just photographs of them. And thank God Larry has pretty good handwriting. Also, you can watch Zen Diaries of Garry Shandling, which is streaming now on HBO. That's directed by Judd. And also on HBO, he produced Gary Goldman's HBO special, which comes out on October 5th. It's called The Depresh. Jeff, roastmastergeneral.com for all things Jeff Ross. Merch. Get your emotional support human t-shirt for $30 at roastmastergeneral.com. You can also get other shirts that we have there.
I wear mine all the time.
Yeah, I love wearing it.
My ESH shirt.
I wore it in the airport. Everyone was so happy. It was amazing. You can get your I'm Jeff Ross. I'm offended by people who are always offended mugs and shirts. And also,
I can't believe that's a real thing.
It's amazing. And
These are
bumping
cool.
mics.
You should make more of these bumping mics mugs.
You like those? Should
Yeah,
we
I
start selling those too?
Those are cool.
Those are fucking awesome. Bumping Mics is on tour Wednesday. You can catch them in Charlotte at the Night Theater. That's September 25th. You guys are going to be on Charlotte on a Wednesday. I can't believe that's the weirdest thing to me.
I know, it's awful.
You guys are going to kill it. Also on October 4th and 5th in Huntington, New York, they're going to be at the Paramount Theater. On October 19th, Prior Lake, Minnesota at the Mystic Lake Casino. October 20th, Winnipeg, Canada at the Club Regent Theater. And November 23rd at Ben Salem, Pennsylvania at the Parks Casino. Jeff, you got some solo shows coming up Christmas time. This is going to be great.
In
South Florida, West Palm Beach, December 13th through the 15th. 5 shows. This is going to make a great Hanukkah present.
I haven't been to Florida in a while. I just thought it'd be a nice time to go.
It's the best time to go. It's Christmas time.
Yeah.
You see your boy Hamo. You guys are going to have some good times. You're going to
It'll
go
be
down to
great.
Deerfield Beach, eat some seafood. And you're going to check us out on Twitter. We're at ThickSkinCast, and Instagram, we're the Thick Skin with Jeff Ross. That's it, buddy.
Good times, my man.
It was a lot of fun this week. This was a special episode.
Fun day.
All right, guys. What do we always say?
You say it.
Life is hard, but we're getting through it together. Peace, baby.